So we're very lucky to have you here, Anshu Jain. Thanks very much for joining us. I know you rarely do this, so thanks a lot for sparing the time. You've really been running from meeting to meeting. How's Davos been for you?
Prannoy, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Believe it or not, I actually watch NDTV every chance I get. Not just when I'm in India, but occasionally overseas as well.
It's very important to know what you say when I'm not in the room.
This is true. I've enjoyed the work you've done. Pleasure to be here today.
I was going to introduce you as the tiger of banking, but actually tiger's another passion you have. We'll come to that later. But all that's happened in Europe, that this sudden change in approach, how long is it going to take Europe to get out of this current problem it's facing?
Prannoy, let's first face the fact that Europe has come a long way. 2 years ago, we were talking about the dissolution of the European Union,
right,
a collapse of the euro. Italian default probabilities were at an incredible 45%.
Right, yeah.
The ECB has done a lot. European governments have done a lot to stabilize Europe. Your question now has to do is when will Europe start growing again?
And will this work, what they've done? Is it enough?
So that now
both
goes,
things, yeah.
That now goes to growth. The problem which Mario Draghi is fighting is one of very low inflation expectations.
Yes.
In fact, the word deflation is now being used
right,
as well. The ECB targets a 2% inflation. We're running somewhere near 0.5%, and that is an issue. The moves which the ECB has announced are very significant. 1.2 trillion euros in quantitative easing, all done through bond buying, very low, record low interest rates. It's a powerful package.
In fact, you had said even if it was a trillion, you would be, think it was pretty good. So it's gone above your expectations?
The markets have not moved as much as one would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
The estimates that I was reading pre-announcement was that consensus was at 750 billion. I know you don't want me to use this precious time to advertise my bank. We did
please go ahead.
We did have the 1.2 trillion euro estimate out there.
Really? Wow.
So he has come in at the top end of any expectations.
Oh, excellent.
The point I was going to make earlier, though, is that this is not enough. The ECB can only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, we need structural reform, which is going to be long and painful to get Europe back to its potential.
Tell me something. I just don't understand one thing that's happening here. Negative interest rates? I keep my money in the mattress. Negative interest rates? Explain that to me.
Thought behind it is to really discourage passive savings and to get capital flowing again, to get investments in business going again, to get investments into the equity markets going again.
Right. And it work? I mean, negative, as you say, put $100 in the bank, get back 99. It's like, hello, I'm keeping my money, cash. But then I might spend it. That's the point. Right?
And that's what they want you to do.
Yes,
oh, by the way,
point.
so
yes.
that's exactly what they want you to do.
Exactly.
It's had the impact of devaluing the euro already, which is definitely helpful. That'll make European exports more competitive. So that transmission channel is working. QE, the way it was orchestrated in the US is a very different capital market structure. Europe does not have the same degrees of freedom. So I don't think you will see a literal translation of the US QE program success to Europe, although at the margin I think it will be powerful.
So America post-2008 has handled the whole crisis much better than Europe overall?
I think what's happened in the US is truly astonishing and a reminder of, above all, how flexible that mighty economy is. For the world's biggest economy to be this flexible, labor costs have dropped dramatically. The US has become much more competitive. Of course, US authorities moved very quickly. You had TARP, you had QE, you had lower interest rates, almost within months of the financial crisis coming to an end. Simultaneously, Prannoy, you've got other factors as well. You've got the US dominating tech, which is a generation-defining business development. Shale gas has come along at just the right time. The US consumer is feeling optimistic again. So yes, that US 3.5 to 4.5% potential growth is now looking quite realistic.
Just to relate all this to India, the impact of the US engine going much faster now, and perhaps Europe getting better, how will that impact India?
So for the global system, the US locomotive picking up steam is good news for everybody. The US is a net importer, so I think that'll be positive. Europe going back above 1% would be good as well. All comes down to the model which India chooses and the choices that are made. If you go to the heart of the Made in India program, which has now been launched, yes, that signals an export tilt. All else being equal, global demand picking up again should be a good thing.
Of course, Europe now has, in terms of growth, contributes only less than 10% to the world engine. But it needs to improve that, because it used to be 25%. It's down to under 10. It gave me a shock. China's 33%.
This is true. We're talking about a three-speed world where the US is growing now very robustly. Fortunately, China and India are showing signs of actually picking the slack back up again. And Europe, as we've said before, is stable, but is hunting for growth.
Now, I never thought, again, I'd like negative interest rates. I never thought I would hear this, that low oil prices are bad for the world. But it is a tough thing. Some areas, some countries are going to lose out, some are going to gain. Net, is it a good thing or bad thing? And how low should it go?
It's a complex set of trade-offs, right. But $1.9 trillion will now be gifted to consumers. So in the US, on average, every person will get a $500 dividend. In Germany, 250 euros. On an average salary, that's a 1% pay raise. If that is now spent on consumption, hard to argue that's a good thing. So let me start with the headline. Right. That's positive, no question about it. Now,
and positive for India as well.
Oh, massively positive for India. So, I mean, so if we do the countries, winners and losers, literally you've got Venezuela and Russia on the one extreme. Right. Frankly, we've got the core Eurozone, India and China on the other. So if you're a massive net importer of hydrocarbons, which of course India is, this is very stimulative and very good news. But to finish your earlier point, who the losers are. Right. Clearly there's countries that are net exporters. I mentioned a few of them. There are technologies. The whole shale revolution was predicated on a certain oil price.
60, 70
and I'm told at $50, something like 50% of that investment becomes unviable. There's many other technologies, oil field services, exploration. Right. So we do have to trace through the complexity of that, which is why you might have been surprised when you came back from your vacations. The initial reaction in global stock markets was down because immediately the calculation was done for the oil producers and the oil services what that meant. Overall, it's positive for the world.
Overall, it's positive. And this is I know, a silly question to ask, but what is like an ideal price of oil? Is it $30, $90, $60, where it is right now? Or ask 10 people and you have 20 answers.
Well, I'll give you the 21st, which is the Deutsche Bank opinion, which is for a gentle appreciation back up towards high 60s and low 70s. And I'm not saying I endorse the logic, but the way it's been explained to me is that the supply flexibility takes a while to kick in. So certainly if oil stays below 50s, slowly supply will be switched off. And unless the demand curve changes, you will get a gradual increase in the price of oil.
Coming a little more specifically to India and banking, your strength, and you know you follow India very closely, apart from the global economy, banking in India. I mean, you forecast the bubble and the subprime crisis, which is an incredible thing to forecast. Do you see any worries like that about India and the banking system and the property market? Is it a bubble? Do you have any fears for India?
I wouldn't claim at all to have forecasted the subprime crisis. We did navigate our way through the crisis.
And you made some decisions before that which helped your bank a lot. But anyway, modesty...
We had a very difficult time and indeed took some losses through the crisis, which were quite painful, and we've learned lessons from it. When I look at India at this point, there is room for cautious optimism. Certainly when I look at the banking sector, there's no doubt in my mind, no matter which path this government goes down, the need for significant credit extension is manifest. I think in the RBI governor, we have an extraordinarily talented individual who's gone to the heart of the issue, which is the balance sheets had to be cleaned up, and he's taken some fairly painful steps to do that. Indian banks, by the way, came through the global financial crisis rather well because they were very well capitalized. Clearly now their balance sheets need to expand, and they need to be ready to support the needs of an economy which is going to grow a lot faster than it has in the past.
Now, these things are, of course, personal conviction, and he is quite conservative about lowering interest rates in India. Do you think he could have done that faster?
You know, it's hard for me to sit in judgment, given
what would you have done?
Well, I give him a lot of credit for acting as decisively as he did about a year ago, when the rupee was getting extremely volatile. He's been very focused on taming inflation and on doing everything which he can to make sure that the deficits come down. Certainly the oil price dividend now allows him a little more room to maneuver.
So I hope he's listening, right? So the property market there, the slight difference is that not so many people are on mortgages. A lot of people invest their own money in the property market, which is a positive, I guess, against a bubble. And I was talking, I think it was to him, or yeah, to Mr. Rajan, about the black part of it. Everybody puts in personal, so that actually adds to the stability. I mean, it's got to be eliminated in the long run, but in a bubble situation, the fact that Indians put a lot of their own money and not take huge loans, is that a good thing? Is that a sign that it's not a bubble? Because it's just, prices are shooting up of property.
To paraphrase a song which I enjoy very much, Prannoy, the Indian real estate market moves in mysterious ways. There's a mystique to the Indian real estate market
Correct.
which completely defeats me. I've been a student of markets all my life. Here's a market, and you know, we are the proud owner of a home in Delhi, but my ability
Which is about 100 times what you bought it at, and you didn't do anything to...
I cannot understand the logic of how any of this works.
Just say, thank goodness I bought it when I did, because now probably one of us couldn't afford property.
A lot of people in India and a shortage of good real estate.
Right. You were saying China seems to be coming back, or is it a secular slight slowdown?
What China is doing is, once again, a very smart and a very painful adjustment. They're going to go from this almost exclusively export-oriented model, which relied on a very weak currency. We all know the factors. Right. And a trading partner which was more than happy to buy Chinese and then repatriate its borrowings back to China in the form of government bonds which were held in very large size. That system served to generate jobs in China for a long period of time, allowed China to industrialize, invest in its infrastructure, and kept inflation in check in the US. It was a very nice example of what global trade can do. Of course, it runs its course, as indeed this did. So my take on China is that they are now switching and focusing on domestic demand. They've fixed their banking system, they've taken some tough steps, and in so doing, their growth slowed down. From everything which I read and the analysis which I've heard, Chinese growth this time around is going to be more resilient, more broad-based. It may not hit the numbers that you've seen in the past, but frankly, they need 6.5–7% to keep their job creation in equilibrium. From the numbers which I see, I think they'll achieve it.
Wow, that's actually a very positive outlook for China.
There are some issues. There's plenty of it. This adjustment is not yet completely done. There's a governance mechanism which is being thought through. There's all these probes on the corruption side. There's a shadow banking system. It's a very vigorous and engaged.
But you know, the kind of model you described, which is so you described so well about how China grew, is that over for India? Can India do that again, or are we? They were in a highway where there was no cars. Now the highway is packed with cars, and we are one of the cars. Or do we have to look for a different model?
So there's two ways of looking at it. One is made in India, which I think is what you're referring to, the right strategy. And the second question is the timing right or not? India needs to create, again, you'll know this better than I do, 1 million jobs a month, right, just to stay where it is. And that assumes that none of the farming sector comes in, I believe, which of course is going to happen. So you've got the twin engines of a young labor force which is being added to significantly, and urbanization, which means a higher percentage will move from the secondary sector into hopefully the primary or tertiary sector. India needs to create jobs. It has a relatively low share of manufacturing as percentage of GDP, so there's room to expand. Now the export game has become very tough, which is what you alluded to. There's slack in the global system, there's a lot of competition, but that's okay. The fact is, a country of India's potential and the great clarity with which this government is driving that message, we ought to be able to definitely move in the right direction. The challenge, of course, is going to be ease of doing business. So if there's a single index I worry about, India is one of the hardest countries in the world to do business. It's well understood, well recognized. Unless that's tackled, it'll be difficult to become an export giant a la China.
Right, right. Of course, when you talk about America even going at 3%, if it does that for 4 years, it's adding another India to the world. So when you say make for India, you're also forgetting that maybe they're growing at 3%, we're growing at 7%, but that 3% is
on a much
10
bigger
times,
base.
yeah.
Well, India needs 6 to keep, again, the same math which says it's 1 million jobs a month,
Right.
I believe tells me that India needs 6% to keep unemployment constant. If you want to add jobs, clearly you need to grow.
Can we ever do what China did, 8, 9, 10% over a period of 20 years?
You know, India's potential is incredible. Incredible. Let me just give you one example. I mean, even if you put manufacturing to one side, India has a known deficit when it comes to its infrastructure, and it has a high savings rate.
Yeah.
All you need to do is mobilize that high savings rate through a banking sector. You don't need foreign capital to do it. Invest in that infrastructure. This is where the government needs to play a role. And at least for the next decade, you could catch up with the rest of the world. Productive spend on infrastructure is the best one-time gift that you can have. So I think India can sustain high GDP growth with low inflation without dependence on foreign capital for a period of time. Of course, what it takes is extensive reform of the operating conditions on the ground.
Yes. I hope when you talk about the potential of India, it's not like my golf. Great potential, great, but it's been great potential for 45 years. So, you've achieved your full potential in cricket, or you've got much higher potential?
Sadly, my ability in playing the sport was always dwarfed by my enthusiasm. So what I lack in skill, I make up for in enthusiasm. India's potential, I think, is quite easily realizable. And one has to give credit to this current government that they are taking steps, and they're very mindful that that has to be their focus.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about 10 rapid-fire questions. Yeah, it's just short one-word or two-word answers. Okay, India's stock market is now kind of at record level. It is at a record level. Your guess 12 months from now, higher, sideways, or down?
It's up tremendously in a very short period of time. Yes, I'm optimistic on India. I think global circumstances and the glut of liquidity that we will see, unless mistakes are made, I would go with higher. But it's a more nuanced, optimistic view than the one I would have given you even 6 months ago.
You are Indian, so you have to give a nuanced point of view. There can't be anything else. India versus China right now, who do you put your money on for returns?
Define it in terms of which investment I'm making.
You choose, that's it.
Equity markets, I would probably say at this point still narrowly China. But if I can choose sectors to invest in, a long-term infrastructure bet, India for sure.
Because I must tell you, I did go to China 20 years ago. For the first McDonald's that ever came there, it was a poor country. People were going around, well, 25 years, were going around on bicycles. I went to factories, they were like Russian factories. 25 years from a low base. So India has a low base, so the growth may be better.
Well, the potential is incredible. I mean, we're back to the same point. Right. If the preconditions are met, there's no country that comes close to the promise that India offers. I'm just being cautious, just given the history and given the complexity of the task this government faces. It's not unlocking that potential is not going to be easy.
Right, that's true. So you're one of the most successful Indians ever, holding one of the greatest positions. Now, if Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, asked you, will you work for me? What would you say?
A chance to serve the country and to make a difference is one which one can never, ever pass up. But I have a commitment to the cause which I'm dedicated to, and I have to see that commitment through and make sure that the bank realizes its potential before I give myself the luxury to think about anything else.
So you'd say, thank you very much, and let me consider it.
I would be happy to help in any way I can while still employed.
One thing you'd like to see in the next budget?
A focus on growth. I think actually focus in general. So of the multiple things that can be done, to have a single point agenda which says I'm going to cut, so I'll say two things, cut the deficit and really focus on growth.
Do a kind of QE kind of thing, pump money in?
No.
No.
Do not. Inflation in India can run away very quickly. Fast, yeah. We do not need necessarily to push for lower interest rates or to push for artificial stimulus. I would much rather see, again, a focus on efficiency, a focus on mobilization.
But you did talk about infrastructure, so...
Sustained infrastructure spending for the next 10 years with the right policies in place, without the expense of the degradation of our forests.
Right, absolutely. We'll actually come to that, because in conservation, you are that's one of your passions, actually. Property, is there a bubble in India or not?
Pass. I genuinely think you'll find many others who'll have far better expertise on this than I do. Okay. It's the only question I'm taking a pass on it.
Okay, fine. Now Obama is coming to India. There are going to be negotiations, give and take. one thing that India should give and one thing that India should take?
Let me quickly, I'm very impressed by the foreign policy initiatives of this government. I think the reach out to the neighbors was brilliant. None of us were expecting it. Very smart, very well done. Relationship with the US is absolutely critical. It's the most powerful country in the world, and certainly with the geopolitical position being what it is. I would give on the environment and trade talks, and I would really encourage the US to stay involved from a geopolitical standpoint in Afghanistan and the region. I really worry that as this energy independence happens, a very rapid pullout of the US may create a vacuum, which, given the events of the recent few weeks actually, India would do well to pay heed to.
E-commerce has taken off in China, it's taking off in India. Is it real or a bubble?
We were very fortunate to have been chosen as one of the IPO book runners for Alibaba. It's an amazing company. I had the great fortune of meeting Jack Ma very briefly here in Davos. It's a very real company. It's doing very real things. And I can see a host of initial ventures being launched in India. I'm no expert, by the way, on Indian e-commerce opportunities. No reason. Mobility is coming, 4G is coming. I see no reason why there shouldn't be similar success stories in India.
So we could have an Alibaba. India could have its own Alibaba one day.
Or a series of smaller successful ventures.
Right. Now, apart from conservation, you're passionate about the tiger. So the new figures showing a 30% growth in 3 years, 60% growth in 5-6 years, complete turnaround of the declining trend. Are you thrilled about it?
First of all, congratulations to everyone involved. This was not easy. In a country of 1.2 billion people with a shrinking forest space, tremendous grinding poverty on the edges of these forests. You and I have both been to these sanctuaries. We've seen the villages which are right on the edge of these forests. To be able to preserve this area, it's not just a success in terms of the number of tigers going up, but the conservation thrust in India over the last many years has worked, which is brilliant. My worry, of course, is that we declare victory. It's a single species index, a very good one, but it doesn't include biodiversity. The rivers are just as important for me as are the marshlands, as is the scrubland in Thar. The Great Indian Bustard is as important to me as the tiger. And really, I think it's a complete misnomer to think that development and conservation are opposite sides of the coin. They're not. We can improve the livelihood of these villages through an enlightened program of tourism, groundwater conservation.
And participate and gain from it.
Absolutely. Groundwater conservation, which, by the way, the top of this government understands very, very well, is directly linked to keeping our forests alive. So complacency would be my worry, but I think we should take a moment and celebrate. And by the way, Prannoy, congratulations to NDTV and to you for playing such a vigorous role.
That's very kind of you. You've been a great backer and always there to when we ever phoned you and asked you questions about it. I think one thing which did happen was, as a result of those 5 years of, we got chief ministers to pledge that they would do certain things like keep the boundary areas intact and not let it encroach too much and let the villagers participate. That state governments are very crucial in India now.
And that was the big step that you took. You chided some, you praised others. It was brilliantly done.
No. We just reported what others did.
The focus now should be corridors. I think isolating a Bandhavgarh and Akana into little islands with no connections will mean that the DNA diversity, which is so important, will break down.
Just getting back to banking again, one big thing that Deutsche Bank is planning in India.
We've been optimistic about India through thick and thin. So I think
it's mostly thick.
Well, we have some very lean.
Thick as in,
well, I mean, I think we have some thin years as well.
What I meant was it's so tough to do business in India. So it's that you sustained it.
Our experience has been a good one. We haven't tried to be all things to all people. We have a focused retail strategy. We've got a vigorous investment banking strategy and a commercial banking strategy as well.
So what's the next big thing for Deutsche Bank in India?
We are looking to grow our balance sheet and to serve more clients and to widen and deepen our network in the country.
So you're committed to becoming bigger in India?
We are committed to being bigger in India. Okay. Predicated, of course, on all of the assumptions that you and I have just run through.
So I've got things like 3 more tiny questions. If you weren't a banker, what would you be?
Believe it or not, a journalist.
Really?
Absolutely.
I want your life and you want mine.
I think more print than television. I don't think I have what it takes to be on this side of the camera, but enjoy writing.
Okay. It's interesting.
If I had the talent, I would have said cricketer, but I was realistic enough to know I lacked the athletic ability. So all else equal, cricketer, but given who I am, probably journalist.
All else being a great potential in cricket, I can tell you. You should have gone for it. One person crucial for your success in life.
Very hard. You're asking me to choose from
and
people.
The people you leave out will feel so upset.
Not just that. I genuinely feel there have been, a number who've made such a difference. I mean, we all do. You and I were talking about your dad off camera before I came on. Certainly, my father and my mother would be where I would start. But then, the second half of my story, there have been so many people who've made such a difference.
Yes, of course. Finally, the most important question of all that I've asked you today: who's going to win the World Cup? Number one. And what changes should we make in our team? Now this is serious, this is a serious question. The rest about the economy and all that.
This is not...
This is serious.
So, the easy answer would be Australia, because they've got the home conditions and all the rest of it, and they look a reasonably good side. The pressure of playing in front of their home crowds will be intense. Their batting looks a little suspect to me, and their bowling is a bit young as well, but I would probably say Australia you have to have Australia on that list. On paper and potential, South Africa by a mile. If they did not have that famous C word hanging over them and their dismal World Cup record. If you take a look at Steyn, Mokel opening the bowling, they've got a good leg spinner coming in. You saw what A.B. de Villiers did. The conditions will suit them. They field really well. They bat deep. So they've got all the pieces.
This is something you really thought about very clearly.
No, actually, I've been thinking about the ECB, frankly, all day.
All right. But I totally agree.
My dark horse call is New Zealand. Yeah. Watch them.
You know what? Australia is top of the bookies, probability of winning. South Africa second, India third, and New Zealand a close fourth.
So now comes the key question. I very rarely doubt the wisdom of markets, but in this case, I would say at this stage, India's chances are overestimated by those bookies.
And what should we do? What should we do to change? 2 or 3 little small things.
Not much you can do about the bowling because you have what you have. And I think you've got the best bowlers there. You've got to just get them practicing. Very important that Bhuvneshwar Kumar picks up his pace again because he is key, and Nishant comes back fit again. I would do some things with the batting lineup. I think Murali Vijay belongs in the team. I know you've declared the 15, but I'd bring him back. He batted brilliantly. He's played well in the T20. So I would have him back. I would keep Shikhar Dhawan, but I would drop him down 5 or 6.
Because he's got huge talent, but maybe not right up in.
And, of course, the team's going to revolve around Kohli. The best batsman in the world, perhaps, in all forms. And we really will count on him, unhealthily so.
So you're going to go to the World Cup for a day?
Sadly not.
No. So you're not going to sleep at night, that's all?
Well, actually, it's a very busy time for the bank, and I'll be very focused on looking after bank affairs.
That's for your public, but I know personally you will be following every bit of cricket. Look at the amount
Cricinfo is a wonderful website which allows me to keep an eye on scores.
NDTV Cricket, what's that?
Oh, I haven't actually.
That app is super.
Is that right? And is it live? Does it update?
It's live app every time, yeah. Okay, there you are.
Lovely,
Thank you very much, Anshu, for being with us. Good luck to you, and you make us proud.
Prannoy, a real pleasure to meet you. Thank you.